Hello everybody, this is Bia Labate, Chief Editor at Chacruna.net. We're back live from the Reform International Drug Policy Alliance Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And we just had live streamed the panel on indigenous voices. And I'm here with Dawn Davis. I had the pleasure to meet Dawn in Last Psychedelic Science. I got to invite her to participate in the plant medicine track, and I'm happy to see that after that conference she's already invited to come to this one. And so it's great to see you, and I just want to cherish the fact that you're indigenous, the fact that you're woman, and the fact that you're a researcher, and the fact that you're studying peyote, all the kinds of things that I enjoy and I admire and appreciate, and I have a lot of admiration for your path. And I would just like to ask you to tell our audience a little bit about you and your research. What is it that you do? Where do you come from?
Okay, hi. So my name is Dawn Davis, and I am a member of the Shoshone tribes of Fort Hall, Idaho. I am a mother of two, and I'm married to Dr. Cleve Davis, who's been very, very supportive in the research that I do, and we're hoping to eventually collaborate on something peyote related and other things, just working on many other things related to our tribe and our people and the things that are important to us.
And where is your tribe at? Which state? Remember that not everybody's from the U.S., so maybe explain a little.
So my reservation is the Fort Hall Indian Reservation in Fort Hall, Idaho.
Cool. And what about, you were talking about your research?
Yeah, so my research is looking at the preservation and sustainability of the peyote sacrament, which the habitat exists in southern Texas, on the border of Mexico, and my research is looking at preservation at the local level, but also looking at preservation within its entire range, which stretches into northern Mexico.
It's a research in which discipline, and what is the title of your dissertation?
The title of my dissertation is The Preservation and Sustainability of the Peyote Sacrament in Reverence of the Native American Church, and it's available online through neips.com.
.net, it's our website, napi.net. It's yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about your main arguments and findings in this research?
Yeah, so a lot of my findings were going back to the disconnection that Native American church members are actually having with the peyote plant. About 70% of the interviewees had no knowledge of peyote depletion that's occurring within the peyote gardens, which is what we refer to the habitat of Texas. They had no knowledge of any type of depletion, and so a part of my recommendations for sustainability is simply educating Native American tribal or Native American church members and other peyotes on what is actually occurring within the habitat and what's actually occurring to the peyote populations, what's causing these depletion factors. Most of them are man-made, but looking at other things that we could possibly look at in the future: climate change, drought, all of these other impacts that have not yet been researched, and really looking at what Native American peyotes can do as far as self-regulation when they're going to make purchases from peyoteros in Texas, that they're cognizant of the size of peyote that they're purchasing, that making sure that these are sustainable levels, 2.5 inches in diameter, or 5 years old is about this big. So we want to make sure that their purchasing practices are sustainable, and that alone, that self-regulation alone, can have great impacts on the population.
How bad is the situation of peyote in the wild? Because I know there's not a lot of data, and how do you have how would you define and explain the general healthy situation or not of the peyotes in the wild? What do you think are our objective information about what's going on? Or is it more, are you looking from more experiential aspect that you're just seeing that it's going each time harder and harder to find, or did you quote any kind of scientific findings or mapping? How did you come to the conclusion that there is a lack of availability in peyote?
So a lot of my research was based on scientific data collected by Dr. Martin Terry, who's out of Sul Ross College in Texas. And then the other part of my research was based on ethnography and in interviewing Native American church members, interviewing peyoteros, and interviewing other stakeholders and looking and analyzing their perceptions of what was available. I mean, we also have, black market peyote that's occurring in Texas. We have narco-tourism, psychedelic tourism that's occurring in both Texas and in Mexico. And so my findings are based on both of those, on both of that information. And also, making the trip myself to the peyote gardens and looking at what was available and then talking with the peyotero.
How was this trip? Can you share a little?
It was a great experience to go, and I took my daughter with me. My oldest daughter was with me when we went, and it was nice to hear of the space that my grandfather had gone and made this pilgrimage in the 70s, and he explained his experience, and so it was nice to go there and have a very similar experience, and it was very important for me to see the land and to make that connection between where my medicine was coming from and to make that connection back home and imagining this in the space of my grandmother's house and in my grandmother's ceremonies and knowing that I now know where it came from and what it took to get to my space and in my ceremonial space.
But when you were out there in the peyote gardens in South Texas, what did you actually see in terms of the species? Did you find that peyote is even time more scarce or smaller or harder to see? What was your first-hand impression?
My first-hand experience was I had a hard time finding peyote at first. It took a long time before the medicine actually showed itself to me. And I was with one of the peyoteros, and the medicine that I was finding were very large. They seemed to me to be very old peyote. I mean, they were, like this size, and there were some that were about this size. I mean, the sizes really varied, but the sizes that I was seeing were not the pups that I had seen that were, like pennies, in ceremony. Those are the medicine that I was seeing. And I wasn't seeing that out in the wild. Out in the wild, I saw very large buttons. And so I don't know if he took me to an area that hadn't been harvested because he was going through rotational harvest. I think it was every 5 years he was harvesting from different areas. So I don't know if he took me to an older harvesting space or if it was one that he had just harvested. I don't know. So I can't really talk on that.
And so you mentioned in the beginning that your part of your job was to interview people from the Native American church. And in your experience, a lot of them don't know that peyote is going through a hard time, or they know it but they don't want to talk about it, or they know it and they're angry about it. What is it that you felt that your tribal members from your tribe and other tribes that I understand you interviewed, what was their perception on the situation of peyote?
So I developed a graph along with the help of my husband. We developed this R graph that depicts the population sales and the number of peyote buttons that are sold. And this graph shows how those numbers are declining. It depicts the cost of peyote increasing, of course, and then the number of available buttons decreases dramatically. And so when I showed that graph to the individuals that I had interviewed, a lot of them said that they were very sad. They could not believe that population was in that much of a decline. And just looking at it over time, it was very disturbing for them. And even when talking with my grandma said that looking at that graph made her very sad. And it is a sad graph because that's the state of the peyote population.
Can you try to draw the graph with your hands?
So the revenue went up and the peyote buttons are going down.
That's just simple like that.
Simple, very simple. I mean, I'm not an economist, but and I'm sure that there are other issues that are impacting that. The cost of gas, the access. I mean, there's a lot of factors that can go into this data and analyzing this data, and I can't analyze all of that, but just visually looking at it, you can clearly see that the trend for peyote is declining, the trend of availability. So that could mean that peyoteros maybe are not harvesting as much, or it could mean that there just wasn't enough peyote to harvest.
Yeah, what I find it really interesting is that we are in the conference of the International Drug Policy Conference, and peyote is one of the most traditional native sacraments of this land, and peyote is an endangered species, and peyote is struggling to survive. And we're here in the back corner with an indigenous woman in a very tiny, tiny tip iceberg of the whole conference that is talking about this. This is major. This is a huge issue, and the psychedelic community has not really acknowledged that we are facing really, really dark times for peyote, and we need to take action to protect peyote as a species. That is one point. And the other point that maybe you could talk something about is the huge role that peyote has as a medicine in treating drug and alcohol-related problems in native tribes. Could you talk something about that?
I can't. That is something that I don't look at, because my research is looking at preserving the peyote plant at its foundation, looking at how we can save and preserve peyote cactus and in its native habitat at its population level, and simply looking at its survival and how we can maintain the supply for the Native American Church and other peyotes.
Yeah, I have read some of the literature, and I know there's a huge potential in there, but we don't necessarily have to go into this. But I just wanted to leave it, the message that peyote is considered to have multiple medicinal properties, therapeutic potentials. Peyote, there is currently zero scientific research on the therapeutic potentials of peyote, so that's a huge gap in our research agenda, and there's very little activism on the potentials that have already been taking place of using peyote as a tool of harm reduction in treating alcohol and drug related problems. So I just wanted to throw in there, but go back to Dawn and her expertise and ask, what do you think are the potential solutions for the peyote crisis?
Potential solutions, I'm not even exactly sure, but what my research showed me was that there needed to be an increased awareness to Native American church members and peyotes on what was occurring in the peyote gardens, looking at those factors of depletion and looking at natural causes and man-made causes, and also looking at purchasing practices, making sure that they're purchasing peyote that, like I said earlier, is of sustainable size, and that we can ensure that peyote has seeded.
How do you feel about the idea of peyote in greenhouses?
I'm really indifferent about that, because when we start focusing on greenhouse propagation, it takes away from the native populations and the native habitat. I don't want Native American church members or peyotes to think that that's going to be the resolution to having a supply of peyote, because we really should be looking at preserving its native habitat, because once you take something out of its natural system, it could possibly turn into something else, a hybrid of sorts.
I have a question that I think is actually important.
Yeah, well, let's turn to our social media manager, Hilary Agro.
Oh, the one behind the camera. I'm just wondering if, considering peyote is endangered, if you think that there should still be scientific, sort of biomedical Western research done on its therapeutic potential?
Oh, that's really putting me on the spot. I have not. I've thought about it since my engagement at MAPS and looking at peyote in that realm, and I'm really indifferent about it. But I do know that there has been literature published based on experiences from Native American church members who have said that peyote helped them help them on their field of sobriety, and it's helped them with their family issues. It has helped them be a better person. It's helped them to function as as they want to in a healthy manner. So I think that I don't even want to say a yes or no on that.
Well, I do have an opinion, and I'm going to take the liberty to share my opinion. Yes, of course we should be doing scientific research with peyote. That is most needed, and scientific research will probably help to raise awareness on the importance of protecting peyote. And there's millions of ways to go around the problem of sustainability, because, for example, you have licenses to cultivate peyote. So she mentioned the research of Dr. Martin Terry, who also happens to be a colleague and a friend of mine at the Cactus Conservation Institute, and we actually filmed him in a little, very short, sweet little video teaching people how to properly harvest peyote, and he holds a license from the government to cultivate peyote. Actually, that's kind of funny. I visited his lab, and you walk into this greenhouse, and there's the lock of the first door, then the lock of the second door, and then the lock of the third door, and then there is peyote, and peyote is in a cage with some strong locks, so it's under security. It's almost like the images that you would have marauding peyotes invading, escaping from the cage, because the DA comes in once in a while and check on the sustainability, on the security issue. So it has to be locked up. So you can have,
well, I wonder how that affects the peyote too, to be locked up in a cage. I mean, I wonder what peyote is going through then.
Yeah, it's definitely a good question, because if you go in the wild, you see, the population spread in the wild versus the population that are kept inside. They have also to have special lighting. But I myself think that the solution of greenhouse is potentially a great solution. So I think we have to work on all fronts, and we have to definitely, protect the land and protect the natural environment. And that's just not a bunch of hippies or new age people that are trying to hunt peyote for fun, but it's major development issues like oil development, agriculture, mining, root plotting that actually, attack peyote in huger scale. So it has to do with development models. We have to be protecting peyote on the wild, but we also should be studying it scientifically, and we should be thinking of alternative ways to create peyote under other conditions, although perhaps that is not ideal. But I just wonder if people that are watching you and want to reach out to you, would you be open to talking to people, or is there anything you think that it would be useful in terms of connections for your path and your career and your research you're trying to do?
Yeah, to be clear, I do believe that scientific research is important to be done on peyote. I think Haley's question was if it was important for therapeutic study. So that I wouldn't answer on. But yes, I do believe that scientific research should continue.
But not scientific research on the therapeutic potentials, or not to use peyote therapeutically?
I believe scientific research is important to study peyote. I do believe that. As far as the therapeutic aspect, that I'm not sure.
Well, that's something that is already happening. That is already in place. I mean, peyote is used by indigenous people traditionally as therapeutic means to treat alcohol and drug related problem. And there's also the fact that the National Indian Health Service consider peyotes to have therapeutic potentials and to be useful in the treatment of addictions, which is a kind of funny, legal dimension to the discussion. If peyote is defined as a Schedule I substance, that is by definition has no potential of no medical potential, and also has a potential of abuse. But there, on the other hand, the National Indian Service does recognize it. So I think there's lots of contradictions, and there's lots of points that need to be still investigated. But I was just going to go back to: is there anything you feel you could benefit from people's help, or can they reach out? Perhaps you share your email or means of contact?
Yeah, please definitely share my email. It's always nice to talk to people. I love talking to people about peyote, and as far as where I'm at in my research, I would not have gotten here by myself. So I'm always willing to talk with others and hear what they have to say. And if there's collaboration, or if there's funding, ideas, whatever it is, I'm open to that. So yes, please share my email.
Yeah, well, we're going to be posting her email on our website, and I just want to say congratulations, thank you, and keep on following us from the DPA, Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you. Bye-bye.